At its peak, I think you've described it as in a league of its own that night. Others have said unprecedented in your report. Tell us about, if you can, paint that scale.
You know, in 28 years of policing and 25 years of that involved with public order, I've never experienced it. I don't think the country has. It just was completely vast. I mean, at some points, you know, I think it was in excess of 22 boroughs suffered some degree of disorder. And it just got to a point when, despite the large numbers of resources we had available to us, you know, they just ran out.
Tell me what that means for senior command officer like yourself. You're in the command room, you want to keep London safe, and you see disorder on this scale, and as you say, you know, the pot of resources a police officer runs out. It's
soul destroying. You know, I feel very strongly as a police officer, it's my role to protect Londoners, and it's soul destroying when you're unable to carry out that role.
How worried were you that you would lose a police officer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were things that I could see on the CCTV cameras that really concerned me and really got me in the gut. You know, I mean, at one point we were able to get to a venue quick enough to prevent a burglary continuing, and we were able to see that on the CCTV, and that was, you know, quite a good feeling. And some we saw then some suspected offenders running from the venue down a side street, and police officers chasing them. And the next thing I saw was cars coming out there, and 3 or 4 police officers completely run over, and you know, and they were just left like rag dolls in the street. And I, you know, for me at that time, I felt that there were at least 2 officers that had died. And that's what I managed to see in front of me, you know. And there were other examples of that during the course of those evenings that gave you that feeling. And you know, obviously not just police officers, members of the public as well, and emergency services.
Tell me about Croydon, because you know you have a personal relationship with Croydon. Can you tell us about that?
The realisation at the end of the day was the thing that hit me the most. You know, I rang my wife the next morning, and after she told me off for not contacting her all night, she then just you know, burst into tears and referred to the fact that Reeves Corner, which was the famous furniture store, was where we bought our first sofa. You know, and it just little things like that make you realise what an iconic place that is. And I dare say people will say the similar sort of story around, you know, the Tottenham, the carpet store. So all these things just, you know, really personalised it for me.
Simple question. Why were there not more police officers in London on that day, waiting, prepared for those riots?
Well, you know, it's very easy in hindsight to say, why weren't there enough officers? I've already alluded to the fact that I honestly believe, and this is a personal belief, that even significant more numbers, it would have taken an absolute huge increase in officers to have actually gripped it on the night. And, you know, at the time, even, you know, the intelligence and everything else was not indicating something off the scale like we encountered on the Monday.
There's 2 separate issues. One is the rioters using social media, particularly BBM, and the second is as a source of potential intelligence. So I think you talked about them being more agile, more swift, outmanoeuvring police sometimes. Could you tell us a bit about that?
You know, we struggled in August because we didn't have enough trained people. We didn't have the right IT to be able to search the social media. Never before have we had to that extent. And you know, now we need to very quickly gather our pace in terms of how we monitor that social media. Although there's lots of things that we've done differently, have changed and are doing differently as a result of what we've learned from the experiences in August, you know, that's the one that we really need to really get a grip of.
One of the things that the mutual aid officers have been telling us is that on that Monday night, many of them were hungry to get involved. They were public order trained officers, and yet they largely were not deployed to the areas where the worst disorder was, because of problem with radios, that they weren't on the Met radio channel.
Okay, well, I'm not aware of that. The work that's been done in the longer term around the radios is being picked up elsewhere, but certainly on the nights we weren't aware of that. In fact, the feedback that we'd had was that our Airwave, which is the national system that we use, actually works very well, and it was one of the things that did work very well for us. I think that you will get instances where people might feel, well, the disorder is happening there, why aren't I being taken there? But we've got to think about the holistic picture, and we also have to think about the resilience. A lot of those cops had travelled a long way. We needed to refresh them and think about the time ahead. You know, we had to think about resilience going forwards. You can't bring someone down from Scotland, you know, and then suddenly throw them into a very difficult situation.
But we're not talking about people brought down from Scotland here. We're talking about people brought down from southern counties, you know, just across, just outside Greater London, brought into London, parked in car parks, and they say they spent the night deeply frustrated. In their words, they watched Croydon burn, and they weren't allowed to get involved. These are public order trained specialists.
Well, if certainly on the night in question, I wouldn't have been made aware of anybody that had been sitting in car parks. It's true that you know, as a force, we have not had an awful lot of experience of bringing in such large numbers from outside forces. Normally, it's the other way around. And there are lessons that we can learn from and have learned from that whole mutual aid deployment bit. But I can assure you that if I'd have known that cops were sitting in car parks, they would have been deployed pretty quickly. But it's inevitable that, you know, the movement of such large resource will have some instances where people are not mapped or assigned, because, you know, this has to be thought about amidst the backdrop of the whole deployment piece is, you know, it's a massive challenge.